Hello everyone. I, Mudita Raj, welcome all of you to second day of CIFFI 2020, world's first 7-day hybrid international film festival by Educational Institute. Is taking place from 15th December to 21st December. The event is being organized by Delhi Metropolitan Education, an A-grade premier educational institute affiliated to Guru Gobind Singh Indraprasth University in collaboration with the prestigious Deakin University. It gives me immense pleasure to announce that we have received 110 films, 80 hours of screen time in 10 languages from across the world, reflecting the diverse nature of this international film festival. We are very thankful for our partners, Vigyan Prasar, CMS Vatavaran, Kids Cinema, We Care Film Festival, Delhi International Film Festival, our university partners, Adamas University, and institutional partners, Indian Documentary Producers Association, Indian Academy of Shorts, and our media partners, The Pioneer and The Policy Times, for extending their support in organizing this one-of-a-kind mega hybrid festival. Before we start the lineup of today's discussion and deliberations, I would request Dr. Ambrish Saxena, Dean, DME Media School, to say a few words. Sir?
Yeah, thanks, Mudita. We have been waiting since morning to have deliberations, to listen to the deliberations of esteemed panelists. So I will not waste any time in saying anything except that I'm really grateful to Dr. Sian Michel that she accepted our request to organize this panel. And I'm also grateful to Dr. Vikrant Kishore, who is the festival director and who has done so much from sitting in Melbourne, from organizing and curating so many sessions. And so we should now move towards listening to the deliberations. Thanks.
Thank you so much, sir. I would also request Dr. Vikrant Kishore to address the audience.
Hello, a very good morning to you all, and welcome to the second day of CIFFI 2020. And Deakin is really proud and privileged to be a part of this. But most importantly, today we have got, four really great women filmmakers here. Shian, she is a colleague of mine, and she's leading this particular panel. But Lena, Meetu, and Leanne, they are really heavyweights in their field. Lena, as you all must be knowing, that she has been doing some wonderful cinema, and she has, of course, gone on to storytelling on online media through Netflix as well. And Meetu, she runs Australia's, and rather I'll say in the Southern Hemisphere's, the biggest Indian film festival, the Indian Film Festival of Melbourne, which is a very prestigious film festival, and it's a kind of a good opportunity for us to have her here and to hear her thoughts. And Leanne is a very well-known producer based in Australia, and of course, worldwide, she is known for her films and the kind of work she has done. So I'm really, really happy to see such great heavyweights of, making difference in cinema, and also leading as women in their field, and creating space for others to join in. So, of course, I won't say much. Thanks all for joining, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, sir. Our first event of the day is a panel discussion titled Streaming Story, Women Filmmakers Online. With the impact of COVID-19 pandemic limiting the ability to visit film festivals and cinemas in person, the shift to online format have garnered many possibilities for women filmmakers to screen their work and reach wider audience, both locally and globally. Today's panel will explore the opportunities and challenges for women filmmakers created by the increase of online film festivals and digital streaming services in 2020. Now, without much delay, I would like to introduce you to the panelists today. Today's session will be moderated by Dr. Sian Mitchell. Dr. Sian is a lecturer in screen and design at Deakin University and festival director of Melbourne Women in Film Festival. She has a background in screen education and culture, with her research focusing on women's screen practice and film festivals, screen and creative industries, and screen pedagogy. Sian's work has appeared in Camera Obscura, Historic Environment, Journal of Cinema and Media Studies, and Peephole Journal. And she has contributed to the National Film and Sound Archive and Australian Film Institute Historical Research blog. Sian sits on the International Advisory Committee for various film festivals. We welcome you, ma'am. Our stellar panel today includes Mitu Bhomik-Lanch, the director and founder of Mind Blowing Films. She is also the director of Mind Blowing World, which is an independent film distribution company that specializes in the distribution of quality local content to Australian, New Zealand, and Fiji audiences. Mitu is the festival director of Indian Film Festival, Bollywood and Beyond, and Indian Film Festival of Melbourne. She is one of the most renowned names contributing to the global outreach of Indian cinema in the past decade. Since living in Australia, Meetu has produced several Indian productions to Australian, including producing 13 episodes of India's number one daily television series, Kahani Ghar Ki. We welcome you, ma'am. Our second panelist, Dr. Venika Mitra, is a director and writer whose debut short film, All I Want, has been screened in numerous international film festivals. All I Want was the first Indian film to win Beyond Borders Diversity of Cannes Short Film Festival showcase alongside the Audience Choice Award. We welcome you, ma'am. Our next panelist, Lean Tonks, advocates for gender equality, championing the careers of female writers, directors, and storytellers across all media. Lean produced feature film Mistress, the Australian Film Institute award-winning short Dog with an Electric Collar. She is a recent participant of Inside Pictures, a high-profile international intensive film business and leadership skill development program supported by Creative Europe and Screen Skills. Lean is the founding board member of Melbourne Women in Film Festival. We welcome you, ma'am. Our fourth panelist of the day, Leena Yadav, is a film director, producer, screenwriter, and editor. Leena has directed a host of fiction and non-fiction television programs, including the first reality show of India, Kahin Na Kahin Koi Hai. Her journey in film started with Shabd, which she wrote, directed, and edited, and which explores the psychology of love, marriage, creativity, and freedom. Leena's third film, Parched, from 2014, explores gender politics in a misogynistic society and is set in rural India and had its premiere at the Toronto International Film Festival. Parched has screened at 57 festivals worldwide to date and received near 31 top awards. We welcome you, ma'am. Now, without much delay, I hand over the forum to Dr. Sian Mitchell. Ma'am?
Thank you very much for those wonderful introductions. So thank you and welcome everybody to this panel, and I'm sure it's going to be an incredibly insightful discussion today. I do have to mention that unfortunately Venika isn't able to join us on this panel today due to some personal circumstances, but never fear, we do have three incredibly accomplished women to discuss their experiences and perspectives on women filmmakers in online spaces. So just firstly though, as I sit here in Melbourne, Australia, I just want to acknowledge that I'm joining this panel from the traditional lands and waters of the Bunurong Bunurong people of the Eastern Kulin Nation. And I'd like to pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. And I recognise that there might be some people here joining today from the traditional lands of many First Nations peoples in our country. And I would also wish to pay my respects to their elders and their communities as well. Okay, so we've introduced our panelists. I don't need to do that bit. So that's been very helpful. Thank you. We can get right into the discussion. So I might just maybe open up the discussion to focus on perhaps some of the ways in which our panelists have engaged with online and digital platforms and technologies, perhaps pre-COVID, because this isn't a new phenomenon. it is something that's been perhaps intensified by this year's pandemic, of course, and we'll get to that, I'm sure. But I thought perhaps if I might throw over to Leanne first, and just start with your experience of working perhaps with Stan, or within your web series as well. So with Stan, with your feature film, The Second, and how that sort of experience might have been different, what opportunity it kind of opened up to sort of go with something that's streaming online as opposed to, you know, your theatrical, traditional kinds of releases.
Thanks, Sian. Yeah, look, I produced the first original feature film that Stan, who is a local streaming service here in Australia, created. And it was done as a partnership with one of our state governments here, Screen Queensland, as an initiative to give filmmakers who didn't have any screen credits an opportunity to kind of find a platform to sort of launch their careers off. And I was working with a female director out of Queensland, Myri Cameron, and Myri, who I think Sian knows actually. It's quite funny that in fact we're all sort of interconnected in a way in this. She had a vision for this story, which was about a female writer who is basking in the glory of her first literary success and pressures of writing her second novel sort of heavily on her shoulders, when her best friend shows up and reveals that in fact the story that she wrote, which she said was an autobiographical piece, is in fact about her. So that sort of story theft, I guess. And we pitched that to Stan and to Screen Queensland, and they shortlisted a few projects to be part of this initiative. And they always had intended that it would be Stan's first original feature. So we knew that from the outset, which I think was quite good, because we had sort of quite a clear idea of what the end use of the film would be. I think at the time also Stan had an objective, and I think this is why potentially one reason why our project was chosen, to broaden its audience base. I think it was pretty much known here as, you know, I think it streamed series like Wolf Creek, and it had become known for quite male-dominated content. And I think it really, they were looking for something that would broaden the Australian audience, particularly the female Australian audience, and bring them to the platform. At the time when, before we went into production, there were about 1 million subscribers to Stan here in Australia. They'd only been fairly recent introductions into the streaming opportunities here in Australia, and they ended up growing after our launch to about 2.25 million, I think, within 12 months. So they were on quite a fast trajectory. We ended up, I think, reaching more people than we possibly would have with an independent film. It was a low budget film, and it was always intended to be $1 million budget. I think that's something that streaming can offer, potentially new voices. And I think that's a really interesting space that a lot of streaming platforms, I think, are looking at right now internationally, not just here in Australia. But I think what it did was, and it was tricky because our financing structure here is intended originally to sort of be connected with a theatrical release. And so in order to tick those boxes and get that government rebate that we can access as filmmakers in Australia, we had to have a theatrical release. And in fact, Mitu, who's also joining me on this, she actually helped us with the theatrical release of the film. So we actually released in cinemas before we released on Stan. We weren't day and date with Stan, but we did a short window in that. And I think that was a really great way of launching the project to the marketplace as well, because we were able to have those big premieres and sort of be able to have, you know, red carpets and all of those wonderful shots, which, you know, streaming platforms don't traditionally give that sort of launching pad. And I can see already Stan using that moving forward as well. So I think it's sort of both worlds working, you know, in partnership. And obviously that's starting to happen internationally now with, you know, deals with PVOD and other streaming opportunities internationally. But yeah, it's been a really interesting exercise, I think, in finding a new space for your content and being able to attract a really wide audience. The thing that Stan also gave us, and working in conjunction with Mitu, was an opportunity to have a really big marketing spend on promoting the film, which as a low budget film we wouldn't have had. So we were on the covers of newspapers, we had billboards, we had buses, we had all of those kind of opportunities, and that would not have happened, I don't think, without Stan. So it was a really rare moment, and also pre-COVID, a kind of quite a strange thing. It felt like this world could change quite quickly, and of course with COVID it has. So I think I've spoken way too long, but that's the gist of it.
I think Mitu wants to say something.
If I may say, I think like you rightly said, what happens is, and Leanne's film was a perfect example, when you have a happy marriage between a theatrical release and an online release, then you know what happens is you're also giving that cinema experience, which cannot be matched by a home viewing experience, whatever the Dolby Digital surround sound, and that collective emotive experience of watching a film with strangers, you know, the joy and the sorrow, the journey that you go together. So I think that experience is as important than sitting and watching something at home, you know. So I think films that manage to do the theatrical experience and then go on online or on streaming platform, it's a win-win for everyone, because also when you have a theatrical release, like Leanne said, you have that big buzz, you have that publicity spend. If you go the festival circuit route, you have that buzz and that prestige attached to your film, so that when you come on a streaming platform, you don't get lost among all the content that is already there. So I think there is some huge advantages when there is a theatrical release and then it comes on a streaming platform.
Yes, and I would like to get to discussing perhaps some of the differences between, I suppose, that live environment, particularly of a film festival, and connecting with audiences and other industry representatives in a moment. But maybe I might just throw over to Lena and just perhaps see if there's any sort of comparison perhaps in what you're experiencing at the moment working with Netflix as a global kind of entity and obviously one of the largest streaming services in the world. Any similarities or differences between that and what Leanne has been speaking about, and me too?
My first experience, like right now, what I'm doing with Netflix is still, I mean, I haven't experienced it getting out there, but my first experience was with my last film, Rajma Chawal, which I had not made for the streaming platform. And I got an offer from them to watch it and see whether, you know, my first thing was like, no way, because I feel like the magic of cinema is in theaters. And this would have gone just online straight off. But I have to say that my friends across the globe saw it within the first week of its release. So, I mean, I saw the power in that. But I genuinely feel, and I've been like really interested in this whole personal experience of watching a film versus a collective experience. And I think your engagement and your reaction to the film is really different. But the only saving grace with Rajma Chawal was that it went the festival route, so I got to see my own film, at least in a theater, and engage with the audience. So yeah, and it is a very, very different, I feel like, the way you engage with the thing. Also, the idea of somebody not watching your content in one go. I mean, for me as a filmmaker, it's extremely disturbing, but you know, that's the way it is. So,
yeah, it's kind of like I see it as a sort of analogous to a music artist's album and wanting the listener to listen to everything in the order and in that sitting as the kind of concept and the story that's being told. So similarly, yeah, watching a whole film at once and getting that experience all together. Yeah.
Also, there's a lot of pressure when you're creating content for a streaming platform that you have to engage the audience immediately. Every second counts. You know, there's this thing that from the beginning you have to like shock them and get them in, and this whole thing of binge watch. You know, how do you engage an audience to binge watch? So you're trying to actually play with the psychology of somebody. So the content has to do things like that. Yeah.
So then does that then kind of, I suppose, change your process as a storyteller when you're given those sorts of boundaries or guidelines, perhaps loosely in quotations, that you know, the storytelling process and how you write or you create kind of changes for a platform like this versus something that is made for a cinema?
It does, and but I take it as a challenge to see. I mean, you know, I still want to tell the same story, but then I have to say it with these, you know, restrictions or guidelines or whatever we may call it, because it is a reality. I mean, it is what it is, and if one wants to put more stories out there, one has to try and understand, you know, what is the psychology and what works there. So yeah, it does for me. It really does change. There's no scope for slow burn you know, on content. It's more like get them now.
Yeah, because there is so much content out there that they could watch instead, I guess, as well. So perhaps then going back to this idea of connecting with audiences and networks and things that kind of happen, I suppose, quite organically at places like film festivals and sort of these physical spaces. With the pandemic this year, what has been your experiences around perhaps festival networking, industry connection, remote collaboration, or just connecting with audiences this year? And maybe Meteor, I might throw to you, and also with your festival director's hat on and an online festival, how has that worked with connecting with audience?
You know, with our film festival, the like in this day and age of Netflix, Amazon, and illegal downloads, for a festival to be relevant and successful, it's very important for it to be very, very interactive, very networking based, where there's lots of opportunities of people to people contact, you know. So, and that has always been the strength of our festival. So we were all very worried because obviously we were lacking that this year because of COVID, when we took everything online. We had our festival in October. We had over 70 films online, but we had over 67,000 film views. And that was a staggering number that none of us were expecting, to be very honest, you know. And the best part, like Lena just pointed out, was all the unexpected viewership that we got, you know, from remote Australia, Darwin, Hobart, regional areas that would have honestly not come to my mind at all. And we were getting messages and mails. So it did bring to the fact that, yes, while it's great to have that networking opportunity, that face-to-face opportunity, and that incredible warmth and energy that the live events of film festival bring, and that opportunity for young upcoming filmmakers to meet their idols, there is also something to be said about having a platform which allows everyone and anyone to be able to access your films, you know, because that's what it's about, being able to reach out, being available, you know. So that was something that we realized from this film festival. And I think in the future, maybe something which is more like of a hybrid version, where you have a certain section online available to everyone Australia wide, if not worldwide, and then have some films which are the big live experience with the filmmakers and everyone present. I think that would be a really good compromise and way forward for film festivals, from my point of view.
Yeah, absolutely. That ability to kind of for festival outreach programs, I think in particular, and finding audiences that can't access, you know, urban centres where a lot of these film festivals are placed, that yeah, there's definite opportunity there. Did you because I know with the Indian Film Festival of Melbourne, you always get such great guests coming across, and there's always such a buzz in our, you know, Federation Square and places like that in Melbourne. So did you were you able to kind of transfer that a little bit in terms of the guests being able to attend online or anything like that?
No, I mean, that energy and that madness and hysteria is completely unmatched, as Leanne will tell you and Lena will tell you. Your ears are kind of buzzing for days afterwards. And that's what we love. That's why we keep doing it and going through it every year. But we did manage to have these Zoom online film club chats, which was similar to what we are doing now. And we had special guests who came and spoke about their films, and there was an opportunity to interact. So in some ways, we did kind of manage to have a level of interaction with the festival guests and filmmakers. But obviously, it's not the same as being face to face and talking to that person. But it was still good, and it was still a knowledge sharing and an experience sharing experience for film lovers.
Yeah. Leanne, we've had a bit of a conversation about this earlier, a few months ago, but just wondering, in terms of your experience in attending, and I'll use that in quotation marks, attending festivals like Cannes, for example, and marketplaces and those sorts of industry specific connections that normally get made in live sort of physical environments. What has been your experience with that this year in trying to get work up and pitching work and things like that?
Yeah, it's completely changed the whole playing field in a way. I feel like Australians, I guess, because we're so far away from most of the rest of the world, consistently end up attending festivals. Mostly the first 3 days is a blur because you're jet lagged. You're constantly juggling, trying to compete with every other film in the marketplace and every other producer. And often it does come down to, who you know and all of those kind of connections. It felt like this year it was a bit more of a level playing field. It was about the work and the project, as opposed to having a pre-existing connection or having, a direct way of kind of, I guess, that physicality of being in the room with someone just gives you sometimes you either kind of hit it off or you don't. And we're all in this kind of crazy Zoom land where you didn't really, everyone felt it was sort of fairer. Everyone had the same kind of situation. We were all stuck in rooms. It was the way you pitched things, I think, that it came down to. And I feel like, in a way, that was kind of exciting because it did give everybody a fair shot, I think, in a way. And there's no kind of, it didn't matter that you couldn't take someone to a swanky restaurant. It came down to what it was like on a phone call and with a screen. And I think that's a really, it's a great leveler, in a way. It just comes back to the work. So while it was frustrating, and I think, I did some of the virtual Cannes stuff earlier in the year. And I think as Australians, you're always on the shitty time zone. That's the problem, I think, for us here. India's probably not quite as bad, but we end up with the midnight or the 1 a.m. or the 2 a.m. phone calls. And I had phone calls at like midnight. I had phone calls at 6 a.m. It's kind of, it's just the way the world works right now. But I think that's a small price to pay at the end of the day for being able to sort of meet with people and talk about the projects that you want to finance. And it does feel like it's particularly in Australia right now with our numbers effectively zero. The only COVID numbers we've got in Australia at the moment are in hotel quarantine. So it does feel like we've got an enormous opportunity here to actually bring a lot of international productions here, a lot of international cast. And I think that advantage, I think, is going to sort of see us in the next 12 months sort of rocket ahead in a lot of places. And I think that's exciting, that sort of advantage we have. Obviously the vaccines that are out there right now are great, and that'll be a wonderful opportunity to kind of solve this problem in the long run. But I do think it's going to give Australians a bit of a head start, Australia and New Zealand and some other countries a bit of a head start. So I think that is a factor too, as well, that's going to help us, particularly in the next 6 to 12 months in Australia. So yeah, for what it's worth, that's kind of what it was like for me this year. Other than being in a room, which everyone's been, sitting there just waiting for Zoom.
definitely on Zoom where we are
Yeah.
now. Alina, I'm not sure whether, have you had any experiences this year in a similar way, or anything to add to that? Or have you been sort of
I
offline
have
a bit?
actually been working through the lockdown. I was first show running a show, which was for a streaming platform. We were working on the scripts. So yeah, life has been fully about Zoom calls, and I don't like Zoom calls. I just feel like being in the room, because also what was happening, and it was interesting actually, but because Corona was always in the room, in everybody's lives, and that was coming into the work. Right now, also, I'm remotely running the edit of my docu. So it's being partly done in LA and here. So again, it's about, and we all feel it, that if we were there together, the whole, value of being in the room and actually working with each other is very, very different. But it's coming with its own lessons, and I'm sure there are positives also to this. Right now, I can't see it because I've had too much of it. But yeah, it's been a very, very interesting time, and I've actually been working through it. I even just shot a short film just last week. So it's I think people are coming back to work also with a shift, and I don't know what that is, and but there is something. I mean, there is something which is shifted in everybody in different ways. That's and I'm waiting for it to get back to see what that shift actually, or to process what that shift actually is.
Yeah. I mean, it is a little bit of the unknown
I've
going
had
into this
writing
year.
and shooting experience in this times, and it's been very, very interesting. Yeah.
Yes, that's an understatement, perhaps. I think it's certainly unveiled a number of challenges, particularly if you are the kind of filmmaker that really kind of does riff off people in the physical space to be able to be creative and collaborate. And then how do you kind of work around that when you're obviously forced to have that distance? So it has, I think, unveiled a number of.
I think overall, whatever people were going through personally, that really got heightened in the internet. It really got heightened. It came into the work, which probably also we were seeing it with a different lens, which doesn't come in at that level. And you could see that everybody was going through something, like big.
Yeah, for sure. There's that sort of universal situation that we're all in. Yeah. So then perhaps bringing it specifically then to women in this space and their stories and their voices. Because I know that there's been been some discourse around, I suppose, places like film festivals that have programmed more women-led, women-directed films. And some of the criticism around that has been partly because of the glut in production or in the product in the film festival space to go around the circuit. That has then allowed for more women's films to be programmed in these festivals. And so I'm wanting to hear perhaps some of your thoughts around, I suppose, how perhaps the pandemic, the kind of static nature of production that it impacted, can be a bit positive about this, perhaps can create further opportunities for women specifically and their work to travel festival circuits, to get more visibility, to find larger audiences. If you have any opinions on that, I'll throw it to anybody, I suppose, on the panel.
I think, Sian, like Leanne and me, we work together on our Indian Film Festival of Melbourne, and both of us, our team is 99% women. We have never gone out looking for girls to hire. It's just happened like that. And certainly, I think a few boys who are there lifting things and putting chairs and being very harrowed. But no, jokes aside, it's just happened. Like this year also on our online film festival, we had a special section called The Future is Female. And I was really so amazed to see the quality, the incredible quality films like Muthon or Wade, just amazing films, whether in animation, action, short films. There was a film called B. Selvi and Daughters, which the whole crew was female, right from producer,
Mhm.
director. It was a short Tamil film. So there were these absolutely wonderful female voices. People like Leena have been the trailblazers who have, made the path for women to be able to tell their stories fearlessly and without compromising. But I think now more and more women are coming forward, at least within the Indian film industry, and telling their stories. And a large part of it has been the democratization of the medium. Like, for example, now, I mean, among all the audience here, I think anyone who's a filmmaker, don't wait for anyone. Take up, if you don't have anything, pick up your phone, make your film, put it on YouTube, at least put it out there for the world to see, and just keep growing from there, which is the advice that we always give to anyone who wants to tell a story. And I think that somewhere is really working, because we had a lot of really good small budget films made by small female teams, women teams that we saw in the film festival, and they had just entered. They had just put their films in Film Freeway, um, no agents, nothing, and just put it out there. And I think that is a really really great way to start your career, to start your journey, especially if you're not from the industry but you still have something to say. And I think because it was online and we were able to accommodate a lot more films, that also gave us as programming and film festival um, of kind of freedom to be able to put films there and see what happens. So because, and what we saw was even like there was a short animation film for 4 minutes, and even that had a huge audience. So it's just this beautiful world of the unknown that we are in right now, where the best thing is just to put it out there and see what happens, because I think every story finds an audience, and that's what I've always believed in.
And I genuinely feel that women are going to come out with many more stories to tell post-pandemic, because I think the range of experiences or introspection that specifically women who've been doing multiple things have gone through in this time. I don't know whether that's going to come into the content, like, or we're going to ignore that Corona ever happened to us. I don't know, because I know I'm working on a new project, and we were thinking, does the world want to see that this happened, or do we want to ignore it?
It's a very good
I
question.
think the introspection is going to hopefully give a lot of content.
Yeah. Leanne, did you have any thoughts on this?
It's kind of interesting because I guess we've got a bit of a unique experience, I think, here in Victoria, in that we had our first lockdown. We kind of thought we were out of it, and we went into this second lockdown, which suddenly kind of escalated. I mean, not on a world scale to the sort of extent that it is elsewhere, but it was pretty extreme. We went from, sort of like 10 cases to like 723 cases a day within a very short period of time. And it was pretty clear our health system here wasn't going to be able to sustain the number of people who are going to need ICU. So we kind of had quite an extreme reaction. And I think, I don't think we had a choice in it. I think that was the only way we could have played it if we wanted to get to the point where we are at now. But I think what it did do is it put enormous strain on, it made anything that was currently in production immediately halt and go into development. Anything that was in development suddenly went into kind of extreme development, because everybody who'd been shooting wasn't able to shoot, so they immediately turned to the projects that they had in development. I think that was interesting. I think for a lot of women, the caregiving roles and the homeschooling kind of opportunities really made that challenging. I mean, I don't have young children myself, but every woman I spoke to who did, and Mishu probably can attest to that, the fact that you're juggling, a child, as well as trying to do your work, as well as trying to have everybody in the house working. And for some people, who don't live in substantial houses with gardens, that's a tricky space. And I think, you know, a lot of women, and this is, I think, where women, I don't know, I've got a viewpoint, women are really good at, I don't want to use the word pivoting, but you know, being able to sort of suddenly turn something that is a challenge into an opportunity. And I think women are good at that. And I think for me, you know, it's really helped me actually have things that were in development that were kind of in endless development, or, you know, had been sort of stalling a bit, being able to kind of go back and focus on those projects and really kind of give them an extra kickstart. And I think that's actually bearing fruit for me now. So I think, you know, it's also going to change, I think, the way we work moving forward, which I think is really interesting. You know, I feel like regardless of the vaccine, I think now the rest of the world's realised that you can trust your workers to work from home at least a couple of days a week. And why are we all, you know, travelling an hour to go into an office to sit there and then travel an hour home? I mean, that our quality of life could be far greater. And frankly, I think we're better human beings out of it. You know, there's this kind of gratefulness here in Australia, particularly in Victoria right now, that you almost, like, every person you see, you want to hug, because it's like you haven't seen anyone for so long. And suddenly there's this joy. And you know, even when we were first allowed out and we had to wear masks, you could see people were smiling from their eyes. We've got this ability to now judge people from the way that their eyes look. And it just kind of gave us a way of looking at the world differently. And I think there's just a gratefulness there. There was a doctor online who I follow on Twitter, who basically said, when it started to open up again back here and we started to have flights, it was like rewatching Love Actually, the beginning of Love Actually, over and over, in that great scene where people were arriving at Heathrow and they're all hugging each other. And it's so true. It felt like that. You know, it really did feel like everyone was in a movie about being able to see everybody again. And it just felt so joyful. And I know it's been very tough because a lot of people have lost loved ones, and that's an absolute tragedy. But, you know, it's also a bit of a warning lesson. And I think the other thing, without trying to kind of turn this into another conversation, the idea that pandemics are going to be with us moving forward if we don't address things like climate change and our environment and the things that are causing these things to happen, looking at the root cause and trying to deal with that as well. So more preventative, I guess, rather than just dealing with these things when they happen. And I think that sort of stuff we're now looking at science and medicine in a different way. And I think that will give us an opportunity potentially as storytellers to reflect those themes in the stories we tell. And there's suddenly now, you know, I know everyone was watching Contagion in the first month kind of going, oh my God, it's exactly like that. But now, you know, it felt like we were in a movie for a bit, I think. But now I think as storytellers, we've got an ability to kind of, this is where we've got to lead. We've got to step up now to, you know, as science and medicine has kind of given us these kind of insights, and support those people to kind of get these messages out, because they are going to change our world. You know, if we have a world moving forward, if we don't deal with some of the issues that we're sort of burying our heads in the sand on. And I think that's, as storytellers, we've got enormous opportunities to communicate those things. And I love to see that, you know, this time inside has really made people start to think about those bigger issues in a way. So I know I have anyway. So it's an important thing. Yeah.
And you know, I think, like Leanne is saying, you know, Sian, that the world is changing, the dynamics is changing. Traditionally, like, and especially in India, as Lena would vouch for it, what used to happen, most of the studio heads are male, most of the cinemas are male. So all the gatekeepers, so to say, who are commissioning your films or even commissioning your scripts, are looking at it from their male gaze, you know, from a man's perspective. So it was very hard for stories that were about women or for women to get up and going. And and even when you were allowed to tell the story, you were, like I'm saying the word allowed to tell the story, it was based on the boundaries and the parameters that was set by men, you know. So so it just became very, sometimes a bit inauthentic and harder to tell those stories. But now there's a lot more freedom, because of a lot of the people who are like the programmers at cinemas, the programmers in streaming platforms are women. So they are also supporting and encouraging other women to come forward and bring those stories forward. So I think it's a very, very exciting time for women filmmakers across the world to come and tell their stories.
And that kind of, yeah, goes back to what you were saying about that sort of democratization and how these sort of digital platforms kind of do allow for that democratization. But we need to see it truly kind of occur at the same time. But yeah, that's it. I will solicit for some questions from the audience. You can write them in the chat window. If you have any questions for our panelists, please go for it. And while you do that, I might just ask at least my final question to the panelists, which is, and some of you have already perhaps mentioned the future going forward from here anyway, but just some final thoughts, I suppose, on the role of online and digital platforms for production, for distribution, for creating women's networks within industry. How do you kind of see that next year and beyond? Would like give you a second to think about it. Mitya, you've already sort of pointed out, you know, that you think it's going to be that sort of hybrid festival idea potentially, and connecting with the audience that way.
I think the world will be more or less a more hybrid world, so to speak. You know, I mean, I think there'll be a right now, even though everybody is saying, "Oh, cinema is dead, theaters are dead," I don't think they will ever die. But I think there'll be this happy marriage between what's online and what's on theater, and sometimes it'll be both. And I think in any case, the audience will be the winner. As far as female filmmakers and stories that are about women, I feel that this will only grow and get more and more authentic, get more and more support, because obviously the viewership is changing, you know, so and that kind of is going to dictate what we watch. So I think it's a really, really exciting time for all of us. And also, as you see more and more women who are coming to the other side of the table, who are commissioning shows, who are programming the cinemas, who are festival directors, they are also going to be very personally invested in this, you know. So and they're not going to do it to tick a box. They're going to do it because they believe in it. So I think that is going to be the biggest difference, and that is what's going to help bring about a much stronger awareness and a really strong support network to make this really flourish and bring about a true equality, you know, in this space.
I hope so.
I'm very optimistic.
Yeah, no, I love it. I love it. Me too.
For what it's worth, I reckon there is going to be a huge return to cinema. I feel like there's once I think people feel safe about doing that, whether that's, you know, getting closer to having a few more people vaccinated or whatever it is, I'm not sure. But I know everyone that I've seen in the last, you know, couple of months, everyone just wants to go out. They want to just connect again. And something about that shared experience of viewing something is so much more special now, I think, than it was before. And frankly, I don't know whether I can sit down and binge another series of blah, 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 blah. I want to sit down and watch something in 2 hours that's going to change my life and make me think differently about the world. And, you know, I feel like I've been suddenly shown that that's a very powerful and much more powerful than I think than we ever realized, that shared experience of viewing things together. And I think that and festivals obviously are a huge part of almost like like-minded people coming together to watch things that they want to discuss and share. And I think that that's if anything, I think it's going to be more exciting moving forward, because there's just going to be such a willingness to kind of have that shared experience again, I think. So I don't know, I'm craving it. I try to go to as many things as I can now. My husband always says to me, you go to the opening of the night, but it's not quite like that. But I do love cinema, and I do really appreciate that experience of of being there and seeing it as the filmmaker imagined. I think that's you will never, no matter what we can create on a screen that you can watch at home, I don't think that there's something about that inability to turn your phone on and get lost in something else, or get distracted, or get up and make a cup of coffee. That sort of focus is just so powerful, and I think there's something very special about that. And obviously it depends on the content. You can't have everything in that sort of environment, and there are things that shouldn't really be in that environment. But I think for those wonderfully powerful films that change our lives, I think I don't think it's going away soon, especially the stories we've got about women for women and for the rest of the world, to show them what we can do, because we're amazing.
I know that with with programming young, emerging and student filmmakers in our festival, that just the excitement for them to be there in that space and see their work for the first time. It might be their first festival experience, and just having that kind of excitement and connection in that communal space is a joy to see and to experience. Definitely. Lena, do you have any thoughts on that one?
Yes, I think it's going to be a hybrid world. And actually, yes, the craving to go to cinemas has increased. So I'm hoping that that's going to come out good the other side. And the other interesting thing that's happened is that lots of people who would never have tuned into streaming platforms have the kind of audiences in India, because we were locked in. So like everybody started watching streaming platforms. So I guess even then your appetite for what is good content, that appetite is also kind of experience newer flavors. So that is what I feel like going forward, that it will influence storytelling. It will bring out newer narratives. It will, and like I said, women will come out the other side with many more stories to tell.
Yeah,
so,
good.
Yeah.
Good. So we have a question from Vikrant. How do we combat misogynistic representation in cinema? Do you think web series online projects are making any difference, or are they still very male-centric?
I think as of now, especially Indian content, I feel we've been suppressed for so long, sexually and otherwise, that right now it's just about expressing that. And it's coming out not necessarily in the best forms, is my opinion. That we need to get over this and then probably find some kind of balance. Right now it's just like, oh, we can abuse, or we can show sex, or we can show violence. So we're going the other extreme with all those things right now. And it's just like spewing out. But I feel like, yeah, I mean, once it comes out, then we're going to try and find some kind of balance.
Yeah, I kind of second that, because we have had also such a strong sense of, we still do such strong censorship in India, that even if you kiss, you have to show a flower coming. So it's been very repressed. And then suddenly you have the world of Netflix and Amazon, where everything and anything is happening. So it is opening the audience's mind a lot, which is the big positive, and giving them what the world has to offer, which is a huge positive, outside the mother-in-law, father and daughter-in-law feud soaps that we all have grown up watching. But as far as misogynistic representation is concerned, I think it will always be there. But at the same time, as more and more women and more aware, informed filmmakers come, they will balance it out. So and also, as the audience gets more and more aware and evolved, they will start rejecting it. So it will find its own way. And the good thing is, most of the streaming platforms also have a very strong code of conduct as to what they accept and don't accept. Like we've seen, even there's a disclaimer now that comes on Netflix before Gone with the Wind, because of the racism, underlying romanticizing of racism that is there. So I think that awareness is going to grow a lot, and that will help all of us as viewers, all of us as filmmakers, and all of us as human beings. So I think it's going to be a very positive change.
Leanne, do you have any thoughts on the Australian context for this? Thinking about
tricky, isn't it?
Maybe things that are being programmed with Stan.
Yeah. Look, I guess other than that sense that Stan have sort of, I think, broadened their audience of late, because there's a conscious acknowledgement on their part that there is a broad female audience to be served, and if they don't provide something, they will go else. And I think that sense of competition in the marketplace is a good thing for audiences. That if Stan doesn't have enough stuff that has the viewpoint that you're interested in sort of looking at, then I think there are too many options you can go now elsewhere. I think I think as that continues to broaden as well, that will be there will be more sort of opportunities to kind of go, well, I like what these people kind of represent, and that brand kind of works for me, and sort of you align where you head with your content to places, I think, that that share your viewpoint of the world, I think. But yeah, it is interesting. I think what I have noticed with say Stan as an example is that they are now turning more towards that female content and sort of broadening their worldview. It felt very Australian, I think, and that was a deliberate choice. I know that they're trying to position themselves as someone who is quite bold in the marketplace and taking on risks that a normal free-to-air broadcaster wouldn't. And I think that's about obviously embracing that space, that there's a bit more freedom. They ended up taking on the true history of the Kelly Gang, which was a film that sort of had a small release here in Australia, but then found its home on Stan. And I noticed they've recently announced that they're going to be doing the story about the serial killer, who I would prefer not to name, because I think that's the best. Yeah, I think that's the best way of kind of tackling that. But yes, there is
my only thing, Leanne, with Stan is that it's not intersectional. It's quite elitist. It's very privileged, elitist Australian viewership model that they follow. So it's not it's not a true reflection of multicultural Australia. So
I agree with you. I think that's so. And look, I am questioning their choice about supporting this film. I think it's a touchy and difficult space trying to get inside the heads of serial killers. And I think I guess what I'm a bit nervous about is when there is in the world at the moment such we're so used to finding everything online. We're so used to sort of whatever you want to find, you can find it. And 5-10 years ago, that was a hell of a lot harder. And when they have looked deeper into the causes and the motivations behind some of the people who do these things, it comes back directly to what they, in a lot of instances, to the influences of what they watched and what they followed and who they listened to. And I think there's a sense now that we have to be a bit accountable. We have to sort of really be cautious about the what we're saying to the world about certain topics. And I think that if anything, is something we all need to kind of keep in mind, because it's a very influential tool, what we watch. And I think we've all realized that we can, you can influence people in wonderfully brilliant ways, but also in horribly negative ways if, the messaging is created effectively enough. And that's our job, if we've got to be as effective as we can as communicators. So yeah, that's my only tricky area, I guess.
I think just on that, but also going back to Me Too's point as well, is that I don't think we can just think about representations of women and misogyny. We also need to kind of think in that intersectional way, because what's kind of come up this year, of course, besides a pandemic, is a lot more discussion and a lot more discourse around race and those sort of intersectional lived experiences of women and people, not just women, people. That also needs to be kind of considered around these sorts of arguments, I think. Yeah. We have another question from Muskan. With more women storytellers, do you feel a parallel concept to male gaze may develop, something like a female gaze?
I love this question.
Hey,
Leela
Vijay.
address this in most of her films, which is what I love.
Who would like to?
I'd like to say hell yes, but but no, look, you know, I think while obviously I'm really adamant about supporting female storytellers and their ways of storytelling, I think we all need to be really great at telling our stories to whoever we want our stories to be told to. I think it's about identifying audience and connecting our story with who those people are. And I think that women do have a very different views, you know, take on things. And I think it's about being able to share that more widely. I think is, you know, is an interesting thing, because I feel like for so long we've almost had, at the beginning when Hollywood first started to let women in, you know, we've had women kind of sort of trying to make themselves into male directors in a way, to kind of tell stories the way that the male writers and the male producers and the studio heads kind of wanted them told, when frankly, really it's about saying, well, let's just start again. Let's just work out what's the best way. And I think that's exciting. So I'll shut up. Talking too much.
Muskan, I love your question, and I'm all for the female gaze and objectifying of men. So I hope we do that a lot, and especially in our films, more item songs with men without shirt dancing. So all for that. I would program them in all my film festivals. I would distribute those films without batting an eyelid. So, I really want to hear what Leena has to say about this.
I think it will increase, and hopefully we'll come to a world where we stop categorizing and seeing perspectives, because yes, who we are and what we've experienced does come into the way when you make a film, it catches, it tells you who the filmmaker is or what they're, so sometimes that's why when filmmakers make something which they're not really aligned to, it comes through in the way they shoot it, or in the way, so yeah, that perspective is so important, because in the smallest ways, women see things very differently. And it's always so refreshing to see a different perspective of, at the end, the stories are the same, they are retold time and again, generation after generation, but just how things are changing starts reflecting in films. And I would love to see many more films with a female gaze.
Thank you. It looks like we have one more question. I did notice that someone had their hand up before, but they seem to have disappeared. So I think this might be our last question. It's related to the Indian context. OTTs are now under INB ministry, meaning that they have the power to censor their content as and when required. At the same time, the government has also made it clear that they are not too happy with the self-regulation code being implemented by the OTTs for their content. What's your take? Might throw to Leena on this one to start.
Yes, this just happened like 2 weeks back or something. I don't know. I haven't seen it in action yet, so I don't know what that will translate to, whatever this, what is the kind of control that's going to ultimately come. I hope not. I hope it's not going to take us back again. Like this would just be too much. If this again takes us back to where we were. So I don't know how this is translating when implemented, because we don't need that, because it's unrealistic in today's world. When governments do things which are against the flow of the world, you have content available to you on the internet. So what are we talking about, the censorship? So it needs to be realistic and in keeping with where we are at. So I will wait for, what does this translate to exactly? It doesn't look good.
And so how recent is it? Oh, sorry, me too.
And to second that, censorship in India has always been very extreme. You know, it has not had, like how in Australian censorship we have, it's a consumer advice that it's given that this is the advice, it contains violence, not suitable for children, or that this is for mature audience only. The censor board does not go and delete scenes or cut scenes. It gives the audience an advice that this is not suitable for children. And the cinemas have to make sure kids below 15 are not allowed. That is different to the way the censor board operates in India, where they sit like an editor and they edit the scenes out. You know, we are a democracy. That choice has to be with us first and foremost. And in this day and age of internet, which is completely unregulated, uncensored, it is impossible to have any kind of censorship. So it's better to use those resources in creating an awareness, creating some kind of a system where people take responsibility. And I know it sounds very idealistic and it's easier said than done, but that is still a more sustainable plan than trying to censor everything, trying to gag people, because that never works. People just, the more you repress something, the more it erupts. So it's always better to find a balance. And especially after the OTT platforms have had such incredible freedom in their storytelling, which the viewers have lapped up, which is, as you can tell, with how their viewership is growing. So clearly there's a huge success and people want that honesty. You can't suddenly take that away, you know. So this is a huge call that I think everybody has to take, and there has to be a lot of honesty in the kind of decisions that people take, not just this is what we should do and this is what you should watch. That just does not work anymore.
Firstly, the board here is supposed to be a certification board. It's not supposed to be a censor board. So
Right.
that's what it should function as, and that's what it should function as, even if it is on an OTT. They have to certify. They should not have the power to censor. Because it's unrealistic. It's totally unrealistic.
You give a strong consumer advice. As a parent, even I would like to know what does this contain before I start watching. So you give a strong consumer advice. You have that in the corner of the screen if you want, but you can't become an editor and a creator, director of a product just because you are in the censor board.
Oh, it does. It opens up such a can of worms, doesn't it? It's like it's archaic. Yeah. Okay, so that looks like no more questions, but I just want to thank our panelists so very much for today. It's been a really great discussion and I hope everyone else has gotten a lot out of it as well. So thank you to Lena, Mitu and Leanne. Also, I just wanted to thank the CIFFI organisers for hosting this panel, for having us as a part of the festival. Thank you so much. And also to all of you who have joined us today. Thanks for coming along.
Thank you, Sian. On behalf of Team CIFFI, I would like to thank all our panelists, and I would also like to thank our partners and jury members. CIFFI would have been incomplete without the efforts and guidance of Dr. Amrit Saxena and Dr. Vikrant Kishore. I would also like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to the Festival Associate Director, Dr. Susmita Bala, Head, DME Media School. Ma'am, I request you to please come and address the gathering. Ma'am?
Thank you, Mudita. Good morning,
Good morning.
India, and afternoon, Australia. It was indeed a wonderful discussion. It was enriching, enlightening. We enjoyed a lot, learned a lot, listening to women filmmakers and giving their perspective about cinema. As head of DME Media School and a Festival Associate Director of CIFFI2020, I, Dr. Susmita Bala, express my gratitude to Dr. Michelle, Lena Yadav, Lian Tons, and Mitu Bhomik. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you so much. I would also like to inform that we have a masterclass coming up by Dr. Ashish Kulkarni, where he will talk about animation and storytelling. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.